Welcome back to the Terry portrait project. We're using colour today. So I got the drawing laser copied at my local photocopying place, and they laser copied it onto a very waxy paper rather than a kind of matte normal A3 paper. And so the results, I think, have been compromised in hindsight with it because it's this shiny surface. I think in future what I'm going to do is just use matte paper. I set off by putting blue around the mouth area because that's an area where there is some greying, and blue is good for cooling down the tones there. But what I noticed since I was using Atelier Interactive Acrylic Fast Fixing medium is that it was so fast, this acrylic plus this medium, that as soon as it touched the paper it dried. So if I was to do this again, I would use a different kind of medium that would allow me to move the paint around a little bit longer. It was almost dry upon contact. It gave a kind of scratchy and dry effect, which I can see applications for, but it wasn't ideal for this portrait. So here I am with a mix, a very light mix of yellow ochre. But even light as it is, it's still very dark, and it created a mid-tone for the skin tones that are going to be built up. I am happy that the medium plus the paint was translucent enough or transparent enough to allow the laser copy below to influence the tones. As you can see, when the paint goes on the highlights, it's very light. When it goes on the dark areas, it is consequently modulated. So by putting on a single tone such as a pale mix, a lightened mix of yellow ochre and some zinc white rather than titanium white, because that's very opaque. Zinc white is more translucent. You can see that the underdrawing influences the single layer that you put on top. Am I happy with it at this stage? No, not really. It does have a kind of muddy, kind of ugly look about it. It's an ugly stage of the painting. However, the fast fixing medium does seal it. So as you paint it, you are sealing it at the same time. And that means if I wish to go on to another water-based oil paint, for instance, Winsor & Newton artisan oil paints, I could easily transition over and layer those oils on top of this acrylic base. Obviously, I have sped up the image, but this painting in total, this sequence, was about 29 minutes. So I felt that it was a rapid way of gaining quite a lot of work for relatively little effort. Most of the work was done in the drawing and in the photocopying or laser copying. The yellow ochre is about to be applied onto the nose and the mouth area, and I was kind of hoping that the blue undertone that I put would actually grey the yellow ochre and give the kind of greenish tone that is, or greenish blue-grey tone that is around the mouth area. I'm using a single flat brush from Rosemary & Co. These are brushes that I use for bird painting, but I don't have a great amount of these brushes, so I just had to make do. It's alright. I think later on in this sequence I go over to a brush which is called a smooshing brush, because I decide to work over the area trying to broaden out the glazes. So at this stage I'm not particularly happy because he does appear to have this kind of jaundice look about him with the yellow ochre. But yellow ochre is a very good base for skin tones in general. The red that I'm about to use to warm up the skin tones is vermillion, and again it's Atelier Interactive Acrylic. I actually really like Atelier Interactive Acrylic because it can be reopened with either water almost immediately or with an unlocking formula once the paint has dried. But this fast fixing medium that I'm using right now seals it so it's impervious to any kind of treatment. It cannot be opened up, it's locked permanently. I had considered just painting the medium onto the whole drawing and then layering the paint on top, but I thought that if I just used the medium and the paint at the same time, I could seal as I painted, and also by working on a small area I can decide how effective it was and make alterations and changes as I went along. So yeah, this isn't looking particularly great. I think it's very, very heavy, and even though I tried to make a transparent glaze out of it, I still feel that I could have gone a lot more cautiously than I did. So, but that was part of the learning curve. With the second figure, I adjust. So that's the smaller figure on the bottom right, and by the time I get to the figure on the bottom left, I have learned enough to actually, you know, make the glazes even more translucent and a much more satisfactory result. I don't think I'm going to abandon this as a technique. It's a technique that I'm learning to use. I'm not sure how many people actually use laser copies as a grisaille for painting in this way, so maybe there's some research to be done there. But I can see how this mid-tone could be lightened by using much more opaque layers of paint subsequent to this one. But again, its advantage is that the majority of the work is done. The most effective part, I think, was when the shirt got done. I'm not sure if you get to see that in this sequence. I think it might actually just be the beginnings of the skin tone. But even with portraiture, the paintings do go through an ugly phase. It's only when you put in the lightest lights and the darkest darks that you get the fullest contrast, and then it seems to be more resolved as a work rather than in this kind of preparatory stage. But I'm just experimenting, I'm just learning. As you can see now, the glazes have been thinned even more, and this skin tone, which is just pure yellow ochre at the moment, is much more satisfactory. It's much more plausible as a skin tone. But it does need to be warmed up with vermilion or some other kind of transparent red. I think Pyrrole red is more transparent. But the reason I chose yellow ochre and vermilion is they were good representatives of the Zorn palette. If they're combined with carbon black and maybe a titanium or a zinc white, it makes a very limited palette. And so it narrows down your options and also narrows down your chances of getting it wrong. Of the three faces so far, I think the one that is most satisfactory is this one on the bottom left hand corner. There is a kind of oily glow about the skin, which skin does have. It has that kind of shine about it. So I think that one works best at the moment. I'm not entirely sure if I'm invested in this artwork enough to see if I can rescue the work with subsequent paint layers. Oh, there's a little bit of vermillion going on right now on Terry's cheeks to warm up those colours a little bit more. And I think there may even be a little bit of titanium white there to try and dull it down, knock it back, but also try to smooth out the kind of scratchiness of the paint going onto the surface and drying almost so immediately as it did. There are other mediums in the Atelier Interactive range. I think I could have gotten away with just using water because it's a water mixable acrylic, as acrylics are. But there's also a slow medium which, as its name suggests, slows down at the drying time considerably. Yeah, some highlights on the nose and the brow ridge, which again aren't completely satisfactory. Here I am going in with a smooshing brush, going over all the areas to try and get a kind of harmony between the tonal areas. Making it very, very dull, very, very flat, and in need of highlights and more opaque layers. Okay, I can see that this video is coming to a close. Thank you so much for joining me on this installment. I'd be delighted for you to join me in the next installment. Thank you for watching.